Hi, welcome to Cyberside Chats. My name is Matt Duran. I am the Director of Training for LMG Security, and I am blessed to be joined by two of our amazing employees here. Tom, Derek, if you guys want to take a quick second and introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is Tom Pohl. I'm the Director of Penetration Testing here at LMG Security. So I lead the team that does all the fun break-ins to people's networks and sometimes buildings.
Hi, my name's Derek Rowe. I am a penetration tester for LMG Security. I'm on Tom's team. I do a lot of social engineering. That's kind of what I specialize in, along with network penetration tests. And yeah, me and Tom get to do a lot of fun engagements together.
So it sounds. I got to hear about some of your recent exploits that we're going to talk about today, and I think it's a really interesting topic. What we want to really get into here is the difference between your security testing of your network from a digital standpoint and your security testing of just your facility from a physical standpoint. So we talk about things often when we're running these podcasts, like the importance of EDR, the importance of antivirus, the importance of a good SIEM tool or an MSSP that's watching your back 24/7. But all those are looking at your digital surface. In your mind, Tom and Derek, because I know you guys do this a lot, what do you think is more important? Is it your digital security, or do you think physical security really comes into play when we're talking about it?
Yeah, so always in these systems, right? There's always people involved, and whereas you've got firewalls protecting the edge of your network from the internet, you have people that need to have essentially your firewalls as well, right? Because everything that comes in front of a human needs to be looked at and scrutinized not only by your systems but by your people. And sometimes that manifests itself in somebody showing up at your door and saying, "Hey, I'm supposed to be here and do a thing," and you need to judge and have a good process and procedure around making sure that they're vetted and actually they're legitimately.
No, I love that you brought that up, Tom. And one of the things, and Derek, I will put this question back onto you. I know that one of the things that you really like to impersonate are things like copier repairmen. And as someone who was actually a copier technician for years, I know that I have accidentally gained access to multiple areas of businesses where I should not have been. Do you think like roles like that, where you are, supposedly a trusted technician, someone who's there to fix something that's broken frequently, like a copier, do you think that helps you get in the door?
I know that we have a lot of success with it. Actually, even today we did on our current engagement we're on. But I think, when with printers, a lot of times they do have issues and people are just kind of like, yes, please go fix them right now. And so
Please
a lot
fix
of
the
times,
damn copier,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
start with this one right here. That's
Yeah,
usually
exactly.
usually what happens.
And I've had times where I actually am talking to people and they're telling me the issues with their printers, so that's kind of a fun twist to the whole scenario as well.
So do you know at this point, from your entries into these businesses, like, do you know how to clean the slit glass and make sure that the actual IUs are functioning and all of that good stuff, or do you just pretend?
I personally, I've gotten better at it, but I mean, really, I just wipe it down, spray with a little bit of high pressured air and call it a day.
I love it. So
Yeah.
when we talk about this stuff, what we really want to get into is when we think about hacks in general or people breaking into businesses, oftentimes there is like a big technical component on the back end. We think about 0 days, we think about nation state actors. What it really comes down to is how people are still kind of the easy entry point to most businesses. And we see that when we talk about phishing, when we talk about social engineering, when we talk about bad passwords, things like that. Give me a little bit of a background here. So when you're getting into a business, when you're trying to do one of these offensive social engineering engagements like this, I mean, what are you targeting?
Yeah. So, first of all, here at LMG, when we do what's called an on-site social engineering engagement, we're not here to pick locks. We're not here to do under the door tools and bypass a physical control. We're here to bypass people. So when we show up, we're going to convince the people that are at the door to let us do things that we shouldn't be allowed to do. And so that's kind of the target with what it is that we do. And so will test the highest of security locations and be able to gain access in a way that was unexpected with the organization as their controls currently lie.
So, Derek, I know from your standpoint, you and I have had conversations about this before, but you've talked about things as simple as like tailgating. So, can you give me a rundown on what tailgating is when you get into a business?
Yeah. So tailgating essentially is following behind, maybe an employee that works for a facility or organization. Maybe they scan their badge to go through access control, and you just kind of, maybe you have a box of donuts in your hands, that you're delivering to the client, or maybe, you're just on the phone pretending to be, going about your day. A lot of times people will see that, and because they're helpful and, courteous, we are able to exploit upon that, kind of drilling down to the point that, people are the biggest weakness whenever it comes to the that angle of cybersecurity.
Right. No, I totally get that. Tom, you look like you've got something to add to this. Like, go
Well,
for it.
sometimes a smile and the confidence that you're supposed to be there is all it takes, right?
Right.
Today we were inside an organization that I told them I was with a particular printer company. I didn't provide any evidence. I didn't have a local contact. All I had was the main phone number of the organization and maybe even an email address that was generic. And I said, yeah, they told me, they told me I'm supposed to go to this one floor. The copier is like by a pillar or something. I'm just guessing all of this. And the guy's like looks at me. And meanwhile, another vendor walks out and I kind of watch the process. They gives them a badge. And I was able to convince the security guy, like, this is all I got, man. But they said it'd be real easy. And he goes and gives a badge and programs it for me. And off I go. I'm into the facility without too much challenge because I was confident.
Sure. Yeah, no, confidence seems to be key when you're dealing with just that face-to-face kind of human interaction. One question I want to toss to both of you, and I know you've both done this before, but when we talk about those badges, so something you can use to swipe into a facility or something like that, those can be cloned, right? Like, how hard is it to actually clone someone's identity badge?
So I actually tried to clone the badge today, and I didn't have any tools that could clone this particular badge. So they're using a better system than most when we test. But yeah, so sometimes it's super easy, like trivially easy, and sometimes it's hard. This particular organization has spent a lot of money to make sure that their badges were not clonable. Not to say that they're not clonable, but they're definitely, you need some more specialized tools to do it. So we weren't able, I tried it just to try it, but that's not normally something that we do on an engagement like this. But since I was there and I had the access and resources, I thought I'd give it a whirl.
No, that totally works out. So, one of the things that I want to ask you guys, because I mean, we do these offensive social engineering engagements, like on site. Try to get into the business, whether it is going in through an unlocked door, tailgating in behind someone. What kind of access does physical access get you to a network, like the people you were testing today?
I mean, at sometimes and most times it comes down to network compromise. That's usually what we're, during different engagements with LMG, we have red team engagements, which are a little different than the on-site. But in a real world attack, if somebody's able to gain physical access into the facility, really they have unlimited amount of different avenues to go down to exploit on the network.
Yeah, I can tell you, generally when you get inside an organization, you can find some place to gain access to their network. And once you're on their network from the inside, from the trusted side of their network, you generally have a lot more access than you do from the outside, right? So there's less firewalls, there's less controls in place that keep you from being able to get to resources once you're physically on site inside an organization. And that's absolutely like every single time. Even in the most secure of organizations, once you're inside, there's a level of trust there because of your physical proximity that they provide because of that.
For our previous engagement that we were on, we had unlocked workstations. So if there's an unlocked workstation that an attacker is able to, gain access to, that's when you can start introducing business email compromise, creating reverse shells back to any kind of attack infrastructure. So it really can multiply quick.
So, Derek, I know when I've talked to you about your social engineering engagements, you've often brought up the term rubber ducky to me, and I want to bring that one up here because I don't think a lot of people know what that actually is. So, is it actually a rubber ducky like attached to a USB stick, or can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, no, it's a USB stick that we plug in that, it'll automate different code that we want to execute. Oftentimes, what we'd use it for is to do a callback or reverse shell back to our
But Derek, everyone doesn't trust USB devices anymore, right?
Right. How do you get around that?
For that
it,
specific thing.
it shows up like a keyboard.
Yeah. So it
And
acts as a peripheral device essentially.
yeah, it's not actually a storage device. It's actually you plug it in, and it's like there's no security around keyboards. And so when you plug it in, it looks like a keyboard that can just type really fast.
So yeah, for those that are not familiar, what they're referring to is called an HID or a human interface device, and that includes things like keyboards, a mouse that you might plug into a computer that's wireless or something like that. And if you have a USB that's programmed to emulate that, as Tom just kind of indicated, I mean, it can plug in and just execute a long string of commands, something like a PowerShell command or something along those lines. So, Derek, again, I want to go back to you on this one because you talk about them all the time. I mean, how frequently are you actually able to get these things into people's networks?
Anytime I can get physical access, I would say about 99.9% chance of success with it. There's not, like Tom said, there's not a lot of controls for that when it comes to securities. Again, going back to the physical access being huge.
I love it. Tom, I want to go back to you on this one. So when we're talking about getting into a business, I mean, you've got that golden smile. Like you walk in the door, you've got that like little grin you give people and they just trust you at that point. Do you feel like that's a big part of getting into businesses?
Absolutely. Yeah, that and just having the confidence and you're supposed to be there, right? Like this is my job, And I'm from the Midwest, so Midwesterners like to trust people. And so there's definitely there's an aspect of that. It's like and you have to dress the part, right? Like I didn't come in dressed in a t-shirt and cut off pants or anything, right? I'm dressed like I'm a professional. I dress the part, I look the part, I act the part, and I give them a good smile. And they're like, "Yeah, you know what? I trust this guy. I think he's trustworthy." And that's where their fatal flaw occurs.
No, I love that. And the outfit tends to make a difference. I remember when I was actually a copier technician, I mean, it was slacks and a polo shirt. So, Tom, Derek, I mean, both of you at this point, because I know you've both done this. I mean, is that kind of the outfit to break your way into a building? Is just something that's like, casually professional, but like doesn't look too formally?
Exactly. That's what I wore today. I wore a black polo and some khaki pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And then I had a
Derek,
lanyard that matched the company that I said I was with, but I think he didn't even
perfect.
look.
No, you were
He
you
didn't
were
look.
getting me to my next point here,
And I had a
and Derek,
clipboard
I wanted to
with a
bring this
work
up to you.
order. Like, yeah,
Yeah. So work orders, things like a company badge or anything like that.
yeah.
Derek, I know I've seen these hanging in your office before, and I think they're amazing. But like, how hard is it to actually mimic an organization's like official badging or something like that?
Oh yeah, my badges are my trophies. It's not hard. Two different, avenues that you can go with that. Sometimes I'll do some OSINT, to kind of see what that organization's logo might look like, for the printer maintenance company. But oftentimes just doing something kind of bland, you just want to kind of blend in. But we'll put our pictures onto the badges. We'll put the logo. I actually have a little embroidered shirt that has my name on it. It doesn't say a company's name, so I can wear it anywhere. And people are like, oh, he's got his name on his shirt. He must be somebody that does stuff.
So, an acronym that Derek threw out there really quick, OSINT, OSINT, that means open source intelligence gathering. And realistically, what that means for those that are not familiar with it is he's going to Google whatever company he is impersonating at that point in time, and their logo and most of their information is probably going to be readily available. Derek, would you agree on that? Is it hard to get that information?
No, it isn't at all. There's in fact, anybody listening to this should just Google their name just to see what pops up. Digital footprints, they're probably
Well,
more than a lot of people think.
Derek's also being modest. Sometimes with some of these organizations, he'll find the company that makes the badges for the organization and order the badges for that organization from the company that makes it for the company we're breaking into.
That is
Then it doesn't just look correct; it is correct.
I mean, that's not even fair, though, man. Come on. I mean, that's like you're completely in the back door at that point. Like, is that a hard thing for you to do? I mean, do people question you when you order these things?
No, it's a pretty straightforward thing. And something semi-related to that. Sometimes we might get into a facility pretending to be printer maintenance. We might find a staff member for the organization's badge laying on their desk. We also just use that real quick to gain additional access. So, I mean, even if we don't make it ahead of time, oftentimes, or an attacker might be able to utilize something on the go.
Yeah. For example, today I went in as a printer maintenance person, but as soon as I was into a private part of the office, I changed my whole appearance. I was no longer a printer maintenance person. I was just a regular employee, right? So I swap out my printer maintenance badge for my client badge. I start to look the part and fit in with the regular employees. I go grab a cup of coffee and I start walking around just like every other employee does.
Love that you brought that up because I know early in LMG's OSC career, we had an employee who was doing one of these engagements, and the way that he actually got busted was because he went into the break room and poured himself a cup of coffee and then didn't refill the coffee pot because it was empty at that point, and somebody spotted that and noticed that he hadn't done that, but then became suspicious because she hadn't seen him before. So, do you run into situations like that where like regular activities, if you just don't do them quite towards what the office is normally doing tend to get you busted?
No, I think looking sketchy, anytime you do something that's kind of out of the ordinary, I think that'll get you busted in a hurry.
I would say, once you get in there, for us being experts in this certain thing, we just know that we're supposed to be there. If you were working at your company, would you not refill the coffee? Like that's common courtesy. So when we fill the part, it just kind of comes naturally. We don't have a lot of people challenge us, especially after we gain access.
I'm the friendliest person to every other employee I come across when I'm inside. I say hi to everybody. I'm like, "Hey, how's your day going? Welcome to Wednesday," right? And people are generally like, "Yeah, hey, today I got access to a floor that I shouldn't have gotten access to." Because I badge swiped and it didn't work, and another gentleman that was on there like, "Oh, let me try that for you," and he got me to a different floor that I wasn't didn't have authorization for because I smiled, and and before we got on the elevator, I'm like, "Man, that weather out there today, right?"
The small talk. I mean, it gets them every time. So one thing that we do want to talk about here, and this is usually kind of an uncomfortable subject for people, but when you do these kind of engagements, I mean, you're bypassing that human security control that we kind of rely on for a lot of the sanctity of our businesses. How do you guys do that without getting into a situation where the organization feels like insulted, like you're trying to trick them, or they end up feeling bad about that?
That's a good question. What we always preach whenever we're talking to our clients is, this is something to help grow their cybersecurity posture. We're not trying to pick on anyone or try to like say, hey, that's what's, everybody point and laugh. It's all a growing moment, even for us, whenever we go in there, we're figuring out how, social interaction works for different attackers when they try the same attack method. So making sure that they understand, and this is just an exercise, a simulation, so that they're able to get a feel for this. Tom, did you have anything?
Yeah, it was kind of fun. On this week's engagement, our client wanted to have some fun with it. And so they literally, since Easter is this weekend, they literally put out Easter eggs. They have several buildings that we were breaking into, and they literally put out Easter eggs that we had to go and find. And they actually filled them with candy, and they didn't tell us where they were. So we had to like literally the 4 giant ass buildings. So excuse my language, 4 big buildings that we had to go find these Easter eggs hidden about. And they're actually all full of candy too. I mean, some of these have got like Kit Kats and stuff in
I
them.
mean, we saw Kit Kats earlier, and since there was just that, for those that are listening currently, there's that giant Kit Kat heist, so those things are at a premium right now.
Right. So now I've got myself some Kit Kats that these are probably worth millions now in the dark market because, after 12
I
tons
love
of
it.
Kit Kats get stolen, they're hard to come by now.
Well, yeah, no, I totally get it. So between the two of you, I mean, what would you say is the big value you get behind doing something like one of these on-site social engineering tests? I mean, what is the big benefit you get over doing something like an external pen test or something like that?
Yeah, so it kind of helps find issues in the human process, right? Whereas network penetration testing will find holes and gaps in your network processing. This will show maybe a gap in the way that you verify and trust people. And so, and we're always here to help people be better and do better. Right. Like that is always our goal, is to help strengthen that security posture, either be it from a network or a digital perspective or a human perspective.
So, Derek, what would you say are some of the biggest problems that you run into when you are actually doing one of these engagements? I mean, is it doors that are propped open? Is it people that are just too trusting? Like, what would you say is your biggest entryway for the most part?
Yeah, definitely, for convenience sake, we find, doors getting propped open often. Oftentimes I'll look for, little wooden door props, just laying around just to point out to the organization, hey, you shouldn't have these around because it just asks, for your staff to prop those doors open. And then you could spend all this money on these access controls, badge readers, what have you, but it's all for nothing if these doors are propped open so people can get in. I'd say the other thing is, more like you said, the social engineering side of it, trusting folks. One thing that I had recognized when you brought up the badge creation earlier, I did a client a couple of years ago where I studied their badges and I got just what I thought was almost, but not quite their badge. And I tailgated up an elevator because the badge actually wouldn't give me, access to it. But I looked the part. When I came out of the elevator, I walked past a lady who was like, hey, you, wait 1 second. And I turned around and I was like, man, I'm caught. She noticed that my badge was a little different than everyone else. And she's like, your badge goes on the other side, silly. And so I was like, you're so right. And I put it on my other side. come to find out that lady was one of the ladies that helped create those badges as well. So I think I did a little bit better than I thought I did when coming to create that badge. So going back to your question, a lot of times, just the level of helpfulness, especially in certain industries where the staff are trained to be helpful, a lot of times that hurts them in the long run when it comes from a security standpoint.
I love it. So from your point of view, I mean, what is the most consistent way that, I mean, both of you, because you both do this, what's the most consistent way that you find you're able to walk through the door?
We usually will kind of look at it from, what size and, what would make the most sense. But I've had a lot of different success with tailgating, just pretending like what Tom said earlier, having that confidence of just walking through. And at that point, you don't have to pretend to be like a printer maintenance guy, and you don't have to even put that up for chance. You're just able to walk in. So that, for me personally, I've had the most success.
Well, I mean, my favorite was one time we intentionally went to the wrong door. So there's a one client where there's a guest door and there's an employee door, and we were coming as printer repair people, and I'm like, let's go to the wrong door. And I went there, and she, it was all glass, so like the receptionist buzzed us in, and meanwhile, while we're walking in there, she's bitching at us because we're using the wrong door. We needed to use the other door. But while she's doing that, she's already handing me a lanyard for the facility without even asking why I'm there. Just she was more concerned about the fact that I used the wrong door rather than I'm the wrong person, right? Like I'm
Right.
not
So
supposed to
she's
do that.
upset because, the dumbass repairman went to the wrong door, but
Yeah,
here, let's
not
get him in
questioning
anyway.
whether or
But
not this is
yeah,
a valid repairman. Yeah.
God, I love that. All right, perfect. All right, guys. Well, I mean, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. Should we jump into our top takeaways here? Do we want to go through some of those?
Yeah, sure.
So I'll go ahead and read them off because I've got them all here right in front of me. But I'd love to hear your takes on these. But one of the ones that pops up top of the list is that, and this happens with phishing campaigns. It happens with physical access, everything else that has to do with gaining illicit access into a business. But attackers will often target people first and not your systems. Do you agree with that point?
Absolutely. Often this is the first way in, even from a network perspective, they'll send you a phishing link, right? You and get a person to click on a link. Or in the case like of on-site social engineering, we're going to the people first. We're not looking at like trying to break through a side door or something like that. We're going to use the trust of another person in order to get in.
So, Derek, would you consider yourself like a human phishing link in some of these cases?
That's a actually good way to put it. Yeah, but just like Tom said, low hanging fruit. That's what attackers go after. Obviously, if we're watching people actively tailgate, coming in from their lunch break, like just people that work for the actual company, then we see right there a weakness that is immediately that hey, I can exploit upon that. You don't always get that with networks. Or more technical style of exploits.
Derek, do you feel like holding a box of donuts helps you in those situations? I know we've done that a bunch of times. So.
I do, and I think maybe just a lot of people like donuts, because when I show up with them, a lot of times they invite me inside. But yeah, I've definitely with different different maintenance scenarios, like printer maintenance. They're like, you guys are such a valued client of ours. We like to, bring you guys some donuts. Of course, when people bring donuts in, it's ask questions later. Let's look at the donuts, and so I do find a lot of success.
You got to bring the good donut.
Yeah, and
That's
so
true.
we'll do some
That's true.
research on that to figure out where
Yeah.
the best ones in town are. We probably spend more time doing that than anything.
I mean, I would love to know where the best donuts in every city I go to actually reside. So that's good news for me. Next up, I mean, physical access. I mean, physical access can equal full compromise. I mean, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Just like having access to, they say the same thing around having physical access to the computer. If you don't have or once you have physical access, you own it. And likewise in a building, right? If I'm physically able to compromise it, then I can generally go from nothing to full compromise, some way, shape, or form.
So when we talk about controls, I mean, people need to test controls on most levels inside the business, but one of the big things that we want to bring up here is that if you are not testing your controls, so untested controls, I mean, we kind of have to assume they are going to fail. Would that be, an accurate statement?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't test it, you don't know if it works or not. And you may have a thing in place, but unless you like actually poke in it and try it out, you don't know for sure. It's just like backups, right? Your backup's not a backup until you test it. So just like you test your backups, you should test your.
One of my favorite examples of that, I've seen a YouTube video of multiple people doing this, but they're access control doors on the fronts of like big office buildings or things like that. And they have a pressure sensor on the inside of the door where when you push the handle, the door automatically unlocks. And I've seen people like trying to swipe their keys and having it not work, and then having someone just walk up with like a coat hanger and like pop the door open. And that it realistically, that's what comes to mind when I think of these things. So, I mean, you've tested everything from the outside. You haven't tested whether or not someone can just like reach in and open the door. So, I think that's a big thing for people to actually consider. The next thing we're going to talk about, and I think Derek, this comes back to you talking about tailgating, is the culture of security around an organization. I mean, understanding what security looks like and not just letting someone with a box of donuts in the door seems to be a big thing. I mean, culture is a security control. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, again, that's what we're trying to teach whenever we do these engagements. We prepare these reports that, point out the holes in their culture, specifically. And we're a reseller of Know Before, and, it does a great job of like doing these different micro modules, teaching security culture and awareness. But yeah, so that, whenever somebody comes behind them with a ladder, they don't just hold the door open or a box of donuts, like you said, that they take that moment to question, do I know this person? Is this somebody who normally comes in here? To ask those questions instead of just assume, oh, this person's here to do something, those moments to think. That's mostly what we're trying to teach you.
So you want to tell people that just having a high visibility vest, a hard hat, and a ladder shouldn't get you into like the most sensitive areas of a company or something like that?
They shouldn't, but we have seen that definitely be tested and proved to be the what you said exactly.
All right. Well, the last thing I want to bring up here is the aspect of real world testing. So oftentimes when we're looking at our security profile, I mean, we're thinking about external penetration testing, internal penetration testing, but a lot of times that on site, can I get into the building kind of testing gets overlooked. And so, I mean, I think real world testing reveals what other kind of audits miss, and I'd love both of you to speak on that one.
Yeah, so I think definitely, audits may look like on paper it's good, it's golden, but until you like actually do the real world tests, like we had to call some audibles while we are on site, recognizing that often it's like we think the audit or this is a control that's in place, but really when you get there you have to have a creative mind and realize, wait, I think I can exploit this other weakness, and then look at exploiting them differently on the fly that might dodge around what's you would normally audit on.
Yeah, and I think you make this comparison a lot, Tom. I mean, an audit for this, it's almost like a comparison between a vulnerability scan versus a full blown penetration test. We're not doing the actual penetration test. We're not going in there and actually testing whether or not, tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars that you spent on your security access controls are even actually, doing a job. Or if you need to, add something additional to make sure that all that money that you're investing into that is actually enforcing what you're wanting it to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I like your analogy that that you need to do a penetration test more so than just a vulnerability scan, right? Likewise with this, an audit's kind of like a vulnerability scan, and the us testing your people and getting past your human firewall is a penetration test. And today, on-site social engineering engagements for us are like penetration tests of your people.
I love it. No, I think the big takeaways here, rather than the ones that I just listed, are never trust anyone with a box of donuts. Don't trust the copier repairman. And if someone smiles and acts really nice, they're probably there to hack you. I think that's kind of where we're going with this one.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Well, we're at the end of our time here. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really do appreciate it. And this has been some immensely valuable information. And again, I really love getting a view into the levels of testing that can actually be very beneficial to a business. I'd love to have you on the podcast in the future here if you're willing to join. Derek, Tom, both of you, again, thank you. But thanks all for joining us on Cyberside Chats, and we will see you next time.